Welcome to the Lady Landlords podcast, where we empower women to gain financial freedom through real estate investing. I'm your host, Becky Nova, founder of Lady Landlords. If you're ready to buy, manage, and grow your real estate investing portfolio, then let's get started. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. Today, we're going to be talking all about the things that you need to have in your starter kit to be able to manage your properties from the very first rental. This is so important because honestly, this is the basis of Lady Landlords. Once now we are able to acquire that property, it makes such a difference in how we manage that, the experience that our tenants have, and how we are able to make sure that we have that cash flow coming in on that property and that we take care of that property for that appreciation that so many of us are looking for. This is going to be important because if you just bought your first property, something's going to go wrong. That's what happens when you buy property, regardless of if it's your primary rental, your first rental property, whatever it will be, whenever you purchase a property, once you finally sign, there's just something that inevitably is going to happen. And that is the case with homeownership. When we think about purchasing a house, there are so many different things that we need to learn to be able to take care of that property, from maintenance to it. But now all of a sudden, not only are we having to take care of the house itself, but now we are putting tenants in that property that we are also going to have to take care of. Here are my top 3 things that you want to make sure to have prepared in your Lady Landlords starter kit. The first thing that we want to make sure that we are doing is understanding our state and federal laws when it comes to being a landlord. There are a lot of different conditions that we have to make sure that we are following as landlords. Now, let's take federal first, and then we'll talk state. Federal, we really need to look into what our fair housing guidelines are. Fair housing guidelines is really ensuring that we are not being discriminatory or being biased toward any of the population within our properties. That goes not only through screening, that also resorts to service and ESA animals, and so many other different factors that we have to think about as landlords. We are now business owners. We absolutely have to understand our federal regulations of what we can and cannot do. So that's a great place to be able to start, is understanding our fair housing guidelines. We talk so much about that in the Lady Landlords Facebook community. Make sure to hop in there and get an understanding of what that really entails. Now, the part where it gets a little more dicey is within state laws. The reason for that is because states have different requirements. Even different cities, different municipalities will actually have different requirements. So it's so important to really understand locally what you can, cannot, and should be doing as a landlord. Within that, we have some states that you are going to find that are going to be a lot more landlord friendly, and other states that are going to be much more tenant friendly. I primarily invest in New York. We are not known for being landlord friendly. We are definitely a tenant friendly state. So there are certain conditions about how much I can raise rent, with how much notice I have to give them, with when different heat needs to be on, when all these little different things are changing throughout that time. Really, the state of New York has laid those requirements out and has put time points on them, deadlines on them, and really has a lot of requirements on them. Every single state has something similar to this. Other states are going to be a little more lax on that. Texas, Florida, they're going to be a little bit more in the landlord friendly kind of zone. Evictions are done differently. So it's very important to understand what's happening within your state, and then also what's happening in your location. For example, I own properties right on the New York City border, and I have properties on both sides. And New York City has very different regulations than the county that's right outside of New York City called Westchester County. So it's very important to understand that I can't just treat all my tenants the same because they're in New York State, but even down to the municipality will tell me if there are certain things that I can or cannot do. This becomes incredibly important, one, to connect with other investors that are in your area, to join communities and really understand and connect with other realtors that also understand the legalities within your area. It's going to be a great way to be able to learn what those conditions are. And that's going to feed into the second item that you need in your toolkit. And that is when we talk about property management. Now that we understand our rules and regulations, how are we actually enforcing those things? What are we actually overseeing with that? We have a choice. We can either hire a property manager or we can manage ourselves. Now, caveat that I will say to a property manager is that we have to then manage the manager. Perfectly okay. But it's very important to make sure we hire the right property manager and we understand how they run their business so we can best support that. So we don't have to worry about the day to day. That's the whole point of using a property manager. Personally, I like to self manage. I actually self manage not only my properties in New York, but also my properties in the Dominican Republic. And I really run them regardless of where I am in the world. As many of you know, I live in both countries throughout the year. And what's great is I can manage my properties from any place. And that's because I put systems in place to make sure that I am able to really run my business from anywhere. So if you'd like to know some of the systems I use, one, we have an entire full podcast taking you through all of the systems. So you can search for that in this catalog that was back in season 2 of our podcast. Otherwise, head over to our resource page, lady-landlords.com, and you will actually see all of the systems I use there listed on that site. So once again, that website, I'll link it down below, has all of the different systems I use that are able to make it where I can actually manage my properties by myself. And I don't have to manage a manager. And I also don't have to lose part of my cash flow paying a property manager. I find it very simple. It takes me a couple hours a week to manage 16 properties. So you can do it too. Within that, we need to think of a couple things. One, now we need to start thinking about how that overall management is going. Once again, I like to be able to use a property management software system called Rent Ready to help aid within that. What that'll allow me to do is to send messages with all of my different tenants to be able to communicate with them, to have them have really that hub, that portal of where they're able to go to get information about how we should be communicating, any other notices, and also how they can pay their rent. Let's break that down. The first place that we want to start, which is going to connect with that state and federal laws, is your lease. A lease is so important to make sure that you have all of your regulations laid out, that you are up to date on all of your state and federal and city laws within that lease. That is the guidebook of what you are giving a tenant. So it's going to be really important to make sure that you have a specific state lease and add in anything else that also your municipality is requiring for that space. That's going to be just the backbone of what a tenant will be able to look at and have an understanding of how this entire lease, the entire time that they should be living in your property, would really be going. For that, I do use easy landlord forms. I love them because they keep up to date on the different laws changing in different states and locations. So I know when I use their documents, I will be able to have the most up-to-date version and I don't have to go deal with all the legislative stuff. So check that out. I will link that down in the comments of the podcast for you. Having your lease put in place is going to be the first thing that you want to do with your property management plan. The second part of it is you want to make sure that you are having your rent collection be really simple. We talk a lot about rent collection in Lady Landlords, and it's really important to be using a platform where you can receive your payments and really be able to track that. It's going to make your bookkeeper happier. It's going to make your accountant happier. It's going to be easier to put together your own profit and loss statement and understand really the ins and outs of your business at that point in time. What I also love about using a property management software is one of the conditions with evictions. Now, if you are looking to evict a tenant, but yet they are making partial payments, even $1, that can actually reset the clock for an eviction. Many of us have remembered after living through being a landlord during the pandemic, we had a lot of eviction moratorium and those evictions got pushed out. Evictions can take a very long time, especially in your state, below New York and California. That is really something that is going to start to eat away, not only at your cash flow, but you mentally, right? When you use Zelle or Venmo or Cash App to be able to collect rent payments, what you can't do is actually stop those payments from coming through, which means that I can sit there and every month just continue to send you $1. And then now all of a sudden I am pushing off that eviction process. With something like Rent Ready and other software systems out there, you can actually turn off partial payments, which is incredibly helpful. I love having that feature. And one of the other things that I really enjoy as well is I think it's a great opportunity to also have those payments be tracked through credit. That rewards great tenants for paying on time, which is something that a lot of them are really looking for. Why not? If you're going to have those payments being made, let's report to the credit bureaus that you have that and you're actually making those payments. And then obviously that will also make an impact if you have a tenant that is not paying you because people don't want to have bad credit in general. It's another opportunity to attach any late payments or no payment at all to then be also associated with somebody's credit. Those systems I find very beneficial. The last part within your property management that you want to think about is your rental comps. Now, this is something you should be thinking about before you put an offer in and before you close on a house, right? We don't go and just price properties by saying, well, hey, now that I bought this house and the mortgage is this, well, I have to rent it for this in order to make money. No, no, no. The market conditions is actually what dictates what your rent should be. So really understanding your rental comps, understanding what is going on in your local market, and pricing your property correctly is going to be incredibly important. And that's how you're going to make sure that you're going to have that tenant moving in and that you're able to collect that rent. Then, third part of your toolkit that every lady landlord needs is to have a plan for maintenance. As I started off this podcast with, it is inevitable that there is something that is going to happen that is going to break in the property. Sometimes that might be a tenant fault. Sometimes that's just because a property is a property and things break. You want to make sure that you have a maintenance plan in place. I do all of that with this thing, my phone. It is incredibly important to make sure that you have the contacts that you need to be able to get those things fixed, make sure that there's no problems with the property, and make sure that we are providing clean, safe housing for our tenants. People that you want to make sure that you have in your phone on speed dial, since we can't say Rolodex anymore. You want to make sure to have your plumber. You want to make sure you have an electrician. It's great to have a handyman also on call. One of the things that I like to do, especially because I love traveling and want to be in other places rather than sitting waiting for tenants to call me, is to make sure that I have the first person that's going to go out when a tenant calls saying that they have a problem. I need somebody that can diagnose that situation. That can be myself, that can be my husband. But if we're away somewhere and out of the country, I need another plan for that. And I don't want to be sending a plumber out just because somebody says that they have a leaky toilet or something. There might be an easier way to get some of those things fixed. And honestly, a handyman, otherwise known as a super here in New York, an engineer over in Chicago, you want somebody that can really go out and diagnose that problem and say, hey, this is a simple fix. I'm able to do it. Or, hey, we now need a little bit more of a skilled, licensed technician to be able to come out and solve that problem. That is going to save you a ton of money by having that. Have not only your peoples ready to go, make sure to get referrals. When you find somebody that is doing great work, make sure to reward them by giving them referrals and making sure to send them business on your property. But we also need to give that maintenance plan to our tenants. We need to make sure that they understand how to communicate with us when they have an issue. As a landlord, I want to know when something is broken. I want to know when something is not working right, because that is going to have an impact on my costs with that property. And I want to know as soon as possible. So with a property management software system, it's very easy to have tenants be able to submit a ticket telling you about that maintenance request. That is one way to go. I love that system because it's clear, it's simple, it can be tracked. Almost like if you are somebody that works for a large company and you have a problem with your IT system and you have to submit a ticket to IT. This is the exact same way that you can do that through property management software. So a tenant understands the status of their ticket and where that stands. What it also does is it alleviates getting just random phone calls all the time or text messages with tenants. I don't like to do that. I like my boundaries. I like to be very clear with how to communicate with me. So that's something that you can do once again through property management software, or have a specific email that you can use for tenant communications. Also, set business hours, whatever that may mean for you. So for example, I might say, hey, I will respond to non-emergency emails Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 within 24 hours. That way tenants understand when to expect a response. We have to think about exactly what you would want as well. If you had a problem in your home, wouldn't you want to know when something will be taken care of, especially if it's impeding on your quality of life? Just as much as we would, so would our tenants. It's also something that's going to get away, like I said, from all the interactions back and forth with tenants on your phone. Those are things that I just do not accept phone calls at 8 p.m., 10 p.m., or on Saturdays and Sundays. That's family time. That's my time. Those calls are literally only for emergencies, just things that are outlined in my lease as emergencies. What that allows me to do is to handle those maintenance requests on my time efficiently and quickly for my tenants without putting a burden of stress on me. So I highly recommend you put those systems into place. As a recap, what we need in our Lady Landlords starter kit for new rental owners is an understanding of our federal and state laws, also having a property management plan in place, and lastly, making sure that we understand what our maintenance plan is going to look like. If you need help putting any of those plans into place, do remember that Lady Landlords has a tenant management certification course. If you are interested in that, make sure to head to lady-landlords.com and book a call with one of our community managers who can get you the information that you need on how to be not only the best lady landlord that you can be, but also how to do it in the most ethical, safest way, cash producing way. Thank you very much for joining me for this episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. Do make sure to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss another episode of the Lady Landlords podcast as we release new episodes every single Tuesday. Also, please make sure to leave a 5-star review, and I will see you all in our next episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. Thank you for listening to the Lady Landlords podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your real estate investing journey, visit lady-landlords.com to book a 15-minute orientation call with me and see if you're ready to join our mentorship program. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter and join our Facebook group for exclusive real estate investing tips and offers. Invest with confidence. Become a Lady Landlord today.